Hi, I'm Robert Osborne. We've set aside our previously scheduled programming right now in order to pay tribute to the acclaimed documentary filmmaker and friend of TCM, Albert Maysles, who passed away on March 5th at the age of 88. Ironically, it was just 2 days after we finished shooting the introductions to several of his films. Now, originally, Albert himself was going to sit down with me to talk about documentaries that he'd made with his brother and partner David Maysles, but then Albert's health took a bad turn and he wasn't able to do it. So he asked if we would mind if his good friend and fellow documentarian Barbara Koppel would join me in his place. We said, of course not, and that's exactly what happened. The night of the programming was intended to air this coming May. We decided with his passing to bring it to you much earlier in his honor. So right now, here's a salute to the great work of Albert Maysles and his brother David. Hi, I'm Robert Osborne. Throughout their careers, the two men we're honoring tonight, documentarians Albert and David Maysles, have inspired numerous filmmakers. And here with me to talk about these two celebrated filmmakers is a celebrated filmmaker in her own right, Barbara Koppel. Welcome back, Barbara.
Thank you very much.
Good to have you here.
Lovely to be here.
Thank you. Our next documentary by Albert and David Maysles follows the lives of 4 Bible salesmen in the 1960s. It's a movie from 1969 called Salesman. First, I have to ask you, why do you think documentaries are important?
Documentaries are so important because they cover an era that we've never seen before. For example, this film, Salesman, it's almost as if it's stuck in the 60s. You see women in house coats with curlers. You see television sets with rabbit ears, antennas. And without documentaries, we wouldn't know who we are as a people. We wouldn't be able to understand our culture. And there are very few salesmen out there anymore going door to door. In fact, the Maysles brothers both were salesmen. Albert sold encyclopedias and David sold perfume.
Interesting. So this is, they have a lot in their own background that this movie talks to.
Absolutely. This is something they really understood, and these 4 salesmen were so interesting and so amazing. Each one had their own name. They were called the Badger, the Rabbit, the Bull, and the Gipper.
What do you particularly like about this movie? Why are we watching this movie?
I think we're watching this movie because this movie really shows what it's like to knock on a door and to sell Bibles to people who can hardly afford to pay the rent. And I think David Maysles once said, he said, the most interesting thing to me is when 2 strangers meet and we get to see what happens. And each one of the salesmen has a different pitch of how to sell it. And it's a very dreary life. It's a very competitive life. The men don't get close to each other because they're in competition. And the film showed me so much about what that bleak and sorrowful condition was. And it reminded me a lot of Death of a Salesman. Where,
for real.
For real. For real.
Interesting. Well, let's have a look. It sounds like I have not seen this, so this is my first time through. So
okay, good.
Provocative idea. Here it is, an interesting piece of work by Albert and David Maysles from 1969, Salesman.